in the circumstances. Graham Hunter is with us this morning. Graham, how are you getting on?
Gentlemen, well, I'm a sort of phlegmatic person who takes stuff like this in his stride. I'm also extremely happy in my own company because I keep myself amused very easily. But turning the page to the serious side, we're living through times that I never expected to see in my life. And just as you've heard news stories about a normally vibrant, noisy city, my neighbourhood is definitely one of the noisiest in the Spanish Peninsula, is extremely quiet. The streets are relatively deserted. Things are abnormal. Supermarkets are allowing you in limited numbers to stock up on the basics. So morning, lads, morning, Ireland. Nice to hear from you. Yeah, doing okay. Currently healthy. But monitoring what is a very, very strange situation here in Spain, and one that I guess it's predictable that Britain and Ireland are heading towards.
How have the Spanish people, the Catalan people, reacted to the lockdown, and just how severe is that lockdown? Because here it's difficult to kind of fully understand just exactly what the implications are from what you're saying. You know, the queues into and out of the supermarkets. Are they stopping people on the streets and asking why are you out? Or is it that level?
The pictures, I understand it, around Spain, and let's be frank now, we are confined to quarters apart from medical necessities or food, or if you have a dog and you have to go for what. So I'm not patrolling Spain. I have to report to you about the differences in conditions across Spain from social media and television and radio, just like you have to. But in my neighbourhood, what we know is that chemists are functioning, supermarkets are functioning. There hasn't been in this part of the world mob buying, fighting over food or toilet roll like you see reported everywhere. This neighbourhood I live in is a really working class, sort of old port village, fishing village, where albeit that it's been gentrified, tourists have bought places, there are old-fashioned values that still predominate. So I didn't expect this part of the world to be one that was knocked sideways by it or to behave indecently in social terms. There's a hospital nearby. It has continued testing. The things about the supermarket are about social distancing. They allow a set number of people within. They monitor that quite carefully so that you can shop, get your goods, leave without it being mobbed. I think that seems sensible to me. As far as this neighbourhood is concerned, there are cop cars patrolling, but it's different from, say, for example, the really pretty revolting footage you've seen of drunken British tourists down on in Benidorm, for example, being unwilling to be herded out of bars or off the beach. This is a different place. The cops are here to remind you of your obligations. I have spoken to colleagues around Spain, certainly around Catalonia, who say that the cops will stop you and say, look, why are two of you out together? If you're going shopping, you're going to the medic and you're not incapacitated, then it should be one person out at a time. And Spain has not become draconian about what seems to be... Look, it's a measure that I don't think anybody in the UK or Ireland has really been able to contemplate, that army in some provinces around Spain, the army is being used to enforce the lockdown, and not just cops. And I think that you have to accept that within recent times, Spain wasn't a democracy. Certainly within my lifetime, there was a dictator here. There is a hardcore of people who accept that when the nanny state speaks, you listen. That isn't unanimous by any means. There are Spaniards who are like, I'll do what I like. But I think it's my perception that the way in which Spain's state has inflicted this need to confine yourself to quarters has been more broadly accepted than it would be in other countries that I've visited, worked in, lived in around Europe. So at the moment, you can say that it's odd, it's quiet. There have been outbursts of, for example, I can't deny the fact that at 10 o'clock when it started, now it's 8 o'clock every night, when everybody leans out of their windows or gets onto a balcony and applauds loudly and cheers and shouts for the health professionals that are keeping this country not going, but coping in a crisis without worrying too much about their own health and patently exposing themselves to risk. When you hear that and when you see that lightning reaction is echoed all around Spain, again, it's something that I don't think we're used to. I grew up in the 60s and 70s when the country I lived in, Britain, was unified by strikes. And when I was about 10 or 11, there were 3-day weeks. There was no power in the house. You had to stockpile food. And I never expected to see that recurring. But it was a time when the country was paralyzed by social movement. Now, I think that over recent decades, that's been eroded, and the "I want, therefore I must get" culture has grown. So to see this unifying of people's expressions of emotion and unity in spirit, that's been quite that touches you, and I think it feels, a slight antidote to the unusual solitary nature of this confinement, whereby I live in a really, really small place, and therefore it's an unusual situation, and there'll be a lot of people either through ill health or difficulties with mental health who suffer much differently from me and my family. So this is coming to everybody. So there are many countries that are, ahead of Spain in terms of the curve of how much impact there is. But it's odd, but I know that so far, me and mine, we've been very lucky.
Obviously, over the last 18 months, there's been a huge political row between the politicians of Catalonia and the politicians of Madrid. Who is providing the political leadership at the moment? And everybody says, this situation can't be politicized, but it's a very political situation where somebody has to be in charge of what's happening and what the response is.
Initially, Ger, there were, I have to step carefully here because I monitor it, but I wouldn't say I'm particularly articulate or intelligent on that subject. But there were Catalan politicians who immediately said, right, what we do is we cut Catalonia off from the rest of the country. So before Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister based in Madrid, who's the national leader, said on Friday, there's a state of alarm. And then before, I guess, this is Wednesday, so before on Tuesday, Monday into Tuesday, he closed the territorial borders. Airspace is still open, so is egress and ingress from Spain, but by sea. Before those things happened, there were Catalan politicians who said, they weren't joking, this is an opportunity. Catalonia must be sealed off from the rest of Spain. Partly because Catalonia is the number 2 community in Spain, and Spain is the number 4 country in the world with the largest rise in virus infections. So there were those who were saying because Catalonia's infections were on the rise, they should close the borders to Spain. I thought that was ill-timed. I think that, I've certainly seen very little political rhetoric from Catalonia that attempts to take advantage of this situation. And what I can say, because I think it's the other side of your question, Ger, is that whether you believe in this Prime Minister or not, and I know that there were many critics saying that he'd acted too slowly, which I personally disagree with, there has been a series of measures whereby the government has announced 200,000 million euros, which will be used broadly to support businesses which are struggling, whereby banks are not allowed to foreclose on mortgages that are unpaid by people who can prove that they've been ill. There's a steady stream of financial support for people who are self-employed and what's called in autonomous status here in Spain. Now, these have only been announced, so the trickle-down effect of financial well-being has yet to be proven. And I think in our industry, what we're taught to do is examine that the claims of government are provable, that they work, that they're not bluff. But in this instance, given this country and the abiding nanny state feeling, I do believe that they're men. I do believe that the money is there. I just can't prove that it's happening yet. And also, it's been outlawed for companies to cut off gas or water or electricity for those who have been left unemployed or left unable to work. And beyond that, private hospitals have been ordered that they must open their doors to public, the general public. They've been commandeered. So I wouldn't come on your show and be a cheerleader for the Spanish government. In terms of the things you'd like to hear, in terms of the things you believe you're paying for when you pay your whatever form of national insurance and tax, when you elect people, some of the things that Spain's government are saying and doing are precisely what you expect. And if I'm being blunt, I think they contrast extremely favourably to the self-interested pig's breakfast that Boris Johnson's government. I know you don't live in Britain, but there'll be Irish watching you who live in Britain, and compared to the pig's breakfast that self-interested git in London has been putting out, I think Spain at the moment compares well.
Yeah.
It's I presume in a place like Barcelona, you don't need a moment like this to help crystallise the importance of sport, the importance of football. We've seen news come out yesterday that the Euros are going to be postponed until next year. You mentioned there the comparisons between different states within the continent of Europe. Obviously, this is going to be a tournament that is held amongst different nations around the EU and, of course, in the UK itself as well. How much has it crystallised it, though, for you, Graham, for people around Barcelona, the absence of this very, very important part of people's lives in Barcelona?
Oh, and you're a tolerant man. Therefore, you may allow me to say that I have to go to my own club in Aberdeen. They've been putting up videos for kids to say, here's your homework that you'd be doing to train with the ball that you can't be doing because we've broken up the training ground attendance. And they've had 200,000 views on that. And they've had the deluge of support and interest from people more widely than the club. Now, that you asked me about Barcelona, but for me, that crystallised things that sport can carry on. So from my beautiful club to Sergio Ramos showing videos of him running flat out on one of these sloped running machines where you're actually running uphill all the time, to various videos of for example, there are a lot of athletic players. Most clubs are imposing training regimes on their footballers via exactly the mode of communication we're using right now, what they call here teleconferencing. But most clubs, again, in the Primera, the top division, have sent, for those footballers who didn't already have home gyms, they've sent specific machinery out, or equipment is a better word, sorry, out to the players' homes. And the demand is that the players, as much as they're not running up and down fields or playing, practicing set plays, that they keep themselves in tone mentally and physically, because with the announcements made yesterday, the president of the federation, that's not La Liga, but the president of the federation, Luis Rubiales, an ex-footballer, has said that the league will be finished, that Spain is committed to seeing out La Liga and the other leagues in the pyramid in a way that doesn't take into account who won the Winter Championship, who's ahead right now. He's steadfastly opposed to that. So the picture that I can report to you is that the clubs are also, as far as I can see, being quite diligent about reporting when they have cases of this virus. So, for example, as of, yesterday on, 35% of Valencia's squad and technical staff had all tested positive for the virus. At the moment, nobody's reported that these are grave illnesses or that there's risk. There's at least 6 cases now reported at Espanyol, the other big club in the city of Barcelona. And I fully expect that there will be more reports as and when those tests are positive, because Valencia, having played at Atalanta and Valencia having the highest portion of coronavirus reports in La Liga, played several domestic games, having been in Lombardy to play in San Siro in the Europa League. So I can't imagine that we're even on the beginning of the upward curve of reports of those in the football community who have caught the virus. Lorenzo Sanz, who you might remember being the president of Real Madrid in 1999-2000, had been for a few years before, won the European Cup in 98 and in 2000. He's the one that Florentino Perez's Galactico policy ousted. He's 76 years old now, and it's been reported this morning that he has the virus and that he's also in a grave state, verging on intensive care. So the impact is there for those of us who want to see it. There have been 400, as of this morning, there have been 491 deaths in Spain, with Madrid and Catalonia, and then I think the Basque Country significantly ahead. And that's, for my money, that's a huge amount of social impact on families and communities around Spain already, and we're merely at the beginning. And then, if I can reduce it to the personal to finish, crystallizing, you talked about, the impact on me has been gigantic. It's like removing an opiate. It's like people tell you it is for them when they stop smoking. There's a craving. I don't just miss live football, but everything around it, the people, the stories, the movement, the interest, the discussions, the ideas, the creativity it sparks in you when you do the profession that we do. And I know you're keeping going. I know that you talked about releasing classic interviews. You're producing a news service for Off the Ball AM. I have less ability to do that as a solitary self-employed broadcaster and writer, and the impact's huge as far as I'm concerned. And also, it's my firm opinion that when we all come back, and boy, I find that really hard to imagine that it's going to be on the schedule, that the authorities have to plan schedules, and I fully approve of that, not a hint of criticism. But given how staggered the impact of the virus is on Europe and the different stages that the countries are all at, I can't quite envisage a unifying date when European competitions can start again, because each country is going to be in such a different state. Domestic competitions, perhaps, although again, I'm a little bit skeptical, and I'd rather that we were clearer on how to cope with this, how to reduce the damage on society. But having said all that, for my taste, the big deal is that football attempts to show solidarity, humour, attempts to continue speaking to the people that miss it. There's very little that sport can do at the moment to solve things, but sport can show resilience, it can show humour, it can show solidarity with the fans. And I really wonder, with an impact like this, which is, we're all coping with as best we can, but when it will change people, it will change fans. There'll be, for football clubs, there'll be fans who aren't there when they come back. That's a brutal fact of life. There'll be people involved in football who personally are in grave financial situations. I imagine that footballers, as they step off this infernal merry-go-round that we've got them on, where they train and play and travel and negotiate such that they can't think and don't spend a lot of time with their families. My opinion is that a lot of football people will come back with a value change, or as if a jar of cold water was thrown over them, because this impacts them. I don't mean Off the Ball AM, but I think in our industry, we treat footballers as commodities, and I think it's disgusting. And it hit home to me hearing Wayne Rooney in his column with Johnny Northcroft in the Sunday Times talking about the way in which he felt that there'd been not only a lack of leadership, but that footballers have been used as guinea pigs. I think that is really prevalent in the modern industry, and footballers now and their families, when they have almost unprecedented time together without either training, playing, thinking, negotiating, promoting, getting sponsored, or summer holidays where you're like, okay, we get away, we get out of our bubble, we go and enjoy the sun. This is unique time for the vast majority of modern footballers in the elite level. and they'll breathe and they'll stop and they'll spend time with their families. And some might say, bring me back football immediately, but others will say, God, I look back and I don't like the way the things had become. And I think there's a possibility that we see slightly more articulate, slightly more militant footballers when the competitions do actually begin again.
I hope you're right, Graham. Stay well, and we'll definitely keep in touch. Thanks a million.
You too, fellas.
It's Graham Hunter giving us some thoughts on what the situation is actually like from Barcelona. A couple of great points there about what happens next and just how difficult it is to reanimate the European competitions, because at what point do you say that it's okay for people to travel between countries again? Like, the notion that we're going to have an end to this season's Champions League seems, wishful thinking at best at the moment. And I can completely understand why you would be wishful thinking and trying to give everybody the sense that this is what's happening. But like, how do you suddenly decide that it's okay for a team from Germany or Spain now to travel to England or vice versa?
Well, yeah, it's impossible. That's why the Euros has been kicked back, I think, because they realise how this is just so unrealistic for this to happen this year. And I think the Olympics should be following the same suit. But I think really, as you say, all UEFA competitions should be following the same suit. At the very earliest, at the start of next season, to get these things played. Like, I think there are two ways of looking at this. You can kind of look at what Graham is saying with a little bit of hope as well, because I think we've heard vague projections, and every projection about when life will resume to normality is a vague projection about when these things might go ahead. And of course, Euro's been kicked back to 2021. It might set alarm bells ringing in people thinking we're not going to have any sport till 2021. But really, I think that's actually just at the more severe scale of things because of the staggered recovery time that is going to happen between countries, that maybe within countries we will have sport resume at some point this summer. And I would say that maybe, we just don't know yet, but perhaps we will get that. It will, of course, be confined into single countries, but that is the first step. The final step is the Champions Leagues and finishing that, and the Olympics and the Euros, where different countries come together. So I think you're right. They are the most complicated ones to come along. Just like one other interesting thing that right at the end there, what Graham said, that the unintended result of this, and it'll be a very small thing, but notable all the same, is the voices of footballers perhaps might be a stronger thing after this. Like, how impactful is the Wayne Rooney comments? How many footballers are thinking like that we are the guinea pigs in all that? Will we now see a response from footballers and athletes more willing to speak about political issues? This issue, not overly political just yet, but every issue gets politicised. Will we start to see athletes speak out more about world issues and topics off the pitch? Perhaps we will, because there's a lot of people of our own generation who haven't had a massive crisis to deal with, who haven't had their backs against the walls in their lives, off the pitch or in any aspect of life to a serious level. This is the first challenge for people of our generation on this level, and this is where people of a certain age have to come out swinging and have to formulate ideas, because they are forced to think and forced to struggle on with life. So it's going to be a very interesting time for humans in sport over these next few months.
All right, so let's start thinking about what the future of the GA might look like. And so we've got Joe Brawley with us this morning. Joe, how are you doing?